Welcome to the Administrator webinar. In this part, we are going to discuss the administrator setups you can or have to do for the scheduling and patient screens. Firstly, we'll begin with the agenda. We start with welcome, then the administrator setups, and then we'll have time for your questions. Now, these are a summary of the things that we're going to cover today. We'll go through the user setup and the admin setups. Now, these are the details. We're going to look at how you can add or modify users, change and hide provider columns, setting up schedule statuses, set up schedule type and set default durations for those types. And we'll also look at how you can add other lookup values like patient account types or exam rooms. So let's start the training. So firstly, let's look at how you can add users into your account. So if you need to add new users, you can go to the security menu on the left-hand side, click on user, and that brings us to the user screen or the manage users screen. This screen shows you the list of active users. We will look in just a moment how you can modify the existing users, but first let's look at how you can add a new user. So to add a new user, just hit the new user option on the top right hand side of the screen, and that brings up the add new user window. On this screen, you can type in the new username that you want to add. You can enter the last name for the user and the first name and select the role as to what type of user it is, whether it's an administrator, billing, front office, mid-level prescriber, nurse, or whatever the role is. You can select that from the type here. So once you've selected the role, next you can select the primary legal entity. The selected primary legal entity is what would load on the scheduler when this user logs in. So whichever legal entity is selected here, when the user opens the scheduler, they're going to see that location or legal entity on their schedule. Next, you can set a temporary password for this user. So I'll type in the temporary password, and you can enter the email for this user. So once you've entered all that, you can hit save to have the user added. So I'll hit the save, and it adds a user. You can see the user is added. Next, if you want to modify the user, you can always click on the user and it brings you to the edit user screen. On the screen, if you want to change any information, once you change it, you can hit save to have it updated. Now let's say if you want to inactivate this user, let's say if this user no longer needs access to the system and you want to inactivate, you can put an end date effective to make that user inactive. Also, you can set a password for the user. Anytime the user forgets a password, if you want to set a password for them, you can click on the set password option and type in a password and save it, and it would reset their password and they will be prompted to log in with this particular password. Alternatively, you can also send them a password reset link. So you just click on the send password reset link, and that will send a reset password link to that user. So you can see there is a green display that shows that the password reset link was sent to the user. So this user was set up as a front office. So if you go to and click on the setup menu here, you would see that this user has all the front desk access automatically assigned. Now, if you need to add additional access or remove an access, you can do that from this screen. Now, let's say if you want to add an additional menu for this user, I would like to add maybe the insurance/plan as a menu or access for this user. I can click on it and that adds the insurance/plan access for that user. Now, if you want to remove an access, you can always put an end date in that end date field, and that access will be removed from that user. Now, on this access list, if you give the top level, like for example, if I give setup here or select setup, the user gets access to all the menus that are below the setup. Now, you would also notice that the setup is listed twice here. So always select the one which is at the bottom or one which is below. Here, the setup with the 1 dot, and there's setup with the 2 dots. So you would always select the setup with the 2 dots. Similarly, you can see patient here is 1 dot and 2 dot and with the 3 dots. So always select the one which is the lowermost, and so that's going to be the patient with the 3 dots. So you can click on that and assign that access. So this is how you can add access or remove access from a user. Now you can also restrict users to certain locations or by days or time. So you've got to set up remote access setting. You can click here, and that opens up into this screen where you can either limit the user's access by days and time, which you can use this for setting the day and time. You can also click here if different times have to be set for different days. You can also limit a user by location by entering their network IP address. The IP address, so let's say if you want a user to be restricted to your office location and not to have access outside of your office, you can enter your office's IP address in here, the network IP address, and when that is entered and saved for this user will not be allowed to access the system from outside of your network. So that's how you can add users or modify users. Now, in the user list by default, you see active users, but if you want to also look at inactive users, you can always click on the checkbox at the top left-hand side, include inactive users, and it'll also list you inactive users. So that was about how you can set up users, which is add users, modify users, or change their access. Next, we're going to look at how you can modify the schedule display header, the column headers, or if you want to change the order of the headers or order of the columns, how you can do that. So to change the header display or the column order, you can do that from the setup provider screen. So you can open up the provider screen, and on the provider setup, you can see at the bottom right hand side, there's a scheduler option section. You can see the display name, the listing order, and there's a checkbox for hide from scheduler. Let's say if you don't want this provider to even show up on the schedule, you can check this box hide from schedule. So the provider would be hidden from the schedule. Now, if you need this display name for Boris Berkeley, which MD, which is what the header that you would see for the provider's column, but if you want to change that and instead, let's say you just want his first name to be displayed there, you can just change the display name to Boris and save it, and that's the column header you would see when you open up the schedule. So we'll just open up the schedule to see that change. So you can see it's changed the header to Boris. Also, if you want to change the order, you can see that listing order is set as 2 for Boris. And let's say if you wanted him to be the first on the schedule, you can change the listing order to 1. I'll save this. Let me just look at the other provider. And this provider was listed as 1, so I'm going to just change it to 2. So this way you can change the listing order. So we'll go back to the scheduler. We'll just take a look. We'll refresh this to see if it has changed. So you can see now the order has changed for this provider. So this way you can also change the listing order. So all that changes can be made from the provider setup screen. So now let me close out of the provider setup. Next, we're going to look at in the schedule screen how you can add additional schedule statuses. So if you want to add additional schedule statuses, you can just click on the show legend that shows you all the statuses that are already configured. You can add new status or edit statuses by clicking on this gear option. That'll bring you to the add or edit appointment status screen. On this screen, you can add new status by hitting the add new status option. So I'm going to click on that, and you can give a new status name here. So I'm just going to type in a new status that I want to add. And then you can click on the word pick to select a color for that status. So I choose a color, and then we hit save to have the status added. So you can see that status is added with that color. Now, if you want to edit the status, you can always click on the edit, and it shows you that status editable, and you can change the status. So let's say if you want to rename the status, so you can rename it and hit update to have it updated. Similarly, if you want to delete the status, you can just click on the X option here to delete the status. Now, just a note for customers who are using an interface which is integrated with an external application where there is a bidirectional sync that happens. That is where the appointments are synced bidirectionally between the two applications. Whenever you do try to add a new status, always make sure you also have the status added on that other system as well. If there is any questions on that, please feel free to reach out to our support or your onboarding customer success coach. Next, we're going to look at the schedule types, how you can set schedule types or add new schedule types and set durations for schedule types. Now, when you're adding appointments, you can see there is a schedule type dropdown. Now, the schedule type can be configured to default durations. You can set default durations for the schedule type and have that duration default when you are selecting the type. So let's say I can have a new patient schedule set to 45 minutes or 1 hour, whereas a follow-up can be maybe 30 minutes. So you can see follow-up is 30 minutes, but when I clicked on the new patient, it is 1 hour. So you can set default durations based on schedule type. So let's look at how you can do that. So to do that, we'll just go to the advanced setup and click on claim lookups, or we'll go to the all lookups, advanced setup, and all lookups. Now, when you bring up the all lookup screen, there are two tabs here, common lookups and billing lookups. Now, you will be on the common lookups and look for on the list for schedule type. So we'll click on the schedule type. So when you click on the schedule type, you can see it shows you all the schedule types that are already added to the list. If you want to add a new schedule type, just hit the plus new lookup on the top right hand side, and that'll bring a new field to add the new lookup value. So you can enter the new schedule type in the value description, and code. Just make sure you enter the same into all the three fields. Whatever the new schedule type that you're adding, enter that into the value description, and code. And then you can set a duration for that schedule type. So now you can see on the list that there are already these schedule types that are added, and they have their own durations, or if you want to, or default durations. But if you want to change or edit the duration or add the duration for an existing type, you can just click on it and you can set the duration. So, or if you want to edit this type here, let's say I want to change this to 30 minutes, I can just change that duration, update it, so that schedule type has been changed to 30 minutes. Appointment duration. Now, when I go and try to add my appointment, when I select that schedule type, it's going to default that duration to 30 minutes. Similar to adding the schedule type lookup, you can also add additional lookups. For example, if you want to add additional exam rooms for your scheduler on the drop-down, exam room drop-down, you can go to the exam room here, and you can see there are 3 exam rooms that are added. If you want to add new exam rooms, you can click on the new lookup value and add new exam room. The same, follow the same rule, enter the same value, which is in the value description and code. Enter the same exam room. If you're adding exam room 4, for example, enter exam room 4 in the value description and code, and hit update to have it updated or added. Similarly, you can also do for the patient account type. So on the patient screen, there's an account type field where you have these different account types. But if you want to add a new account type, you can hit the new lookup value on the top right hand side of the screen, and that'll bring you the fields to add the new account type lookup. You can enter the new value. The same info can be entered into the value description and the code, and hit update to have that new lookup value added to your list. So those were all the different administrator functions that you could do with access to these advanced setup or the security menu. So that's all for the administrator side. If there are any questions, please do type them into your question section and I will try to answer them for you.